Hello and welcome back to my channel The Bleach Fanfiction. Join us as we explore the world of fanfiction and fantasy and bring you the best story and discussions. This is the fifth part of What If Ichigo's Time Travel Made Him Unstoppable. By Grimlock_Bragi.so. Give this video a like and subscribe for more videos in future, so let's get into the fanfic. Shiro ignored the fearful looks directed at him from every fodder Shinigami he passed by. Once upon a time, he would have slaughtered them all for looking at him like that. Since the BLD war, he found them too disgusting to pay attention to. Most Shinigami he ignored, knowing them to be self-absorbed a-holes that just wanted to be famous or powerful. There were exceptions, though. Like which? Most of the lieutenants, actually, but Shiro mostly only gave a shit about which. The bleached Zanpakuto was calmly sauntering towards the cells in the 4th Division, having asked some fodder where she was minutes ago. He didn't like that she was in the cells. He disliked that he understood why more. He wasn't anywhere close to her yet, but he already knew she was devastated by the loss of Aizen, even more so because the maniac didn't get a chance to do any fed up shit this time. She couldn't start to realize that maybe he wasn't this perfect being if she hadn't seen him do anything bad. His faking his death, killing the Central 46, and replacing them was broadcast across the whole of the Seriidii, but Shiro already knew she was in massive denial. If she even believed that he did all those things, the Hollow was sure she convinced herself Aizen did it for a good reason. Right now, she'd probably slit her wrists sooner than she would accept that maniac was evil. A frown formed on the Zanpakuto's face, and he started walking faster. He hardly even had to glance at the zoned-out guard in front of the entrance to get the man to jump and throw the door open. The pale spirit continued on his way, grunting in thanks to the guard. Just because he didn't always use them didn't mean he didn't have manners. Most of the cells the Hollow passed were empty, the only exceptions being 4th Division fodder that were cleaning the spaces. The only cell with an actual occupant was at the end of the row. A guard was sitting on a stool next to the door, reading an issue of the Seriidii bulletin. The man had an Asachi strapped to his hip, and it filled Shiro with disgust. The fodder probably didn't even care that he couldn't contact a portion of his Fanji soul. He was probably content just having a sword and a uniform, so he could go to some shitty bar in the Rukongai and use his status to get women. The Zanpakuto shook the thoughts away. Not every piece of fodder was an a-hole. King told him regularly to not assume they were. Hey! The guard looked up before yelping as he rushed to his feet. His Asachi was drawn. The Hollow couldn't call it a sword, not when it was so lifeless and empty. The Zanpakuto felt Witch's Ryatsu signature twitch inside her cell. Calm you sheet. I'm just here to see Momo. He didn't like having to use her actual name, both of them really liked it when he called her by the nickname. The Zanpakuto decided the guard in front of him was a CNT when the man rushed to open the door to Witch's cell without even asking why. He was the most suspicious-looking person in the FNG Seriidii, and leaked Hollow Ryatsu. He could have been coming to kill her for all the piece of shit knew. And he just opened the FNG door without even asking why. The Hollow growled at the man as he entered the cell. The pathetic wimp screamed and ran out of the building. Even more annoyed at the shitty excuse for a guard, the pale spirit rolled his eyes and shut the cell door behind him. The lock slid in place. He could get King to come and open the door if he didn't end up just cutting the lock in two. The pale spirit turned to face the empty space that was Witch's cell. There was a mat maybe an inch thick lying in a corner that looked uncomfortably stiff. A toilet sat in a different corner, with no privacy whatsoever. The lieutenant herself was sitting in the middle of the room with her legs folded under her, staring out the window above her. Her hands were folded in her sleeves, and her Zanpakuto was nowhere to be found. Probably confiscated. The Hollow looked over the room again, searching and hoping he didn't find what he was looking for. One of the wooden pillars lining the walls had a chunk missing. Shiro desperately wanted that to have been from before Witch was confined to the room, but he couldn't rely on faith. He sniffed the air. Damn it. He sighed heavily and walked up in front of her. She didn't outwardly acknowledge him, but he was about to fix that. He sat down with his legs crossed, manifesting his blade in a reverse grip in his right hand. The hollow adjusted his grip on the blade so his fingers were in the gap in the center of the blade. He thoroughly didn't know why that gap was there, but in situations like this, it was useful. The spirit felt Witch's gaze slowly fall down in curiosity of what he was doing, and kept himself from reacting. Grabbing the cloth that made up the hilt, he pulled. He may not understand why he didn't have a normal hilt, but he was grateful the cloth was indefinite. He essentially had an endless amount of gauze for treating the few he cared about. Biting the bullet as he was known to do, Shiro reached out and grabbed Witch's right wrist before pulling it towards himself. The action caused her hands to slip out, revealing themselves bloody and holding an equally bloody piece of wood. Before she could react, he stole the spike of wood and tossed it across the room. The Zanpakuto then mentally cussed at not having anything to clean her up. "I shall gather the needed items," Asen announced in his head. The hollow nodded in appreciation and the Quincy manifested outside the cell before disappearing in Hirenkyaku. The shock that Witch had found herself in faded, and she tried to jerk her hand out of the Zanpakuto's grip. "Let go of me. Not until I fix your wounds." Anger formed in the lieutenant's eyes as she tried to climb to her feet. With the grip the hollow had on her hand, she couldn't rise higher than her knees. "What do you care about my wounds? You're a hollow. You killed the man I love. I killed the man that brainwashed you." He would never brainwash anyone. He faked his fucking deed, and gave you a letter saying your best fucking friend was the one that killed him. And I can tell he brainwashed you cause you believed him. She froze. "How do you know about Aizen-sama's letter? You didn't hear the rumors?" Rage flooded her eyes again. "That you're from the future? That Aizen-sama started a war that killed thousands of people? Why would I believe that? Aizen-sama was the greatest person in all the worlds." She started slapping him with her free hand. "If he was so great, why would he send you after your best friend? If he was faking his death, why not tell you about it? Why not tell you why? Why would he tell you an innocent man did him in?" Shiro shouted, easily ignoring her attacks with his hierro. "I'm sure he had a good reason. What about talking over Central 46? He slaughtered them all, covered it up, and ordered Midget's death. All ta get a fucking rock. He had an army o' hollows waitin' in Hueco Mundo, and most of them just wanted ta kill sheet. What part o' that screams good man? The Central 46 was corrupt and self-centered. Almost everything they did was in service of themselves. Aizen-sama was doing a good thing by replacing them. I ain't saying the Central 46 were good, but was any different by ordering an execution to get a fucking rock?" The hollow rose to his feet, and Witch rose in response, though she nearly had to look straight up due to their closeness and the difference in height. "In case you didn't know. Everything he did was so he could replace the Soul King. The fucker just wanted to remake the world with him as king. He would be a great Soul King," she screamed defiantly. Shiro's yellow eyes burned with emotion. Would a great Soul King rip off a Quincy's arm just to find out if they could use their powers with one hand? He growled quietly. Would a great Soul King ave his hollows eat a Shinigami's leg just to find out if they could shunpa with one leg? Would he kill one half of a split soul just to see what would happen? Would he manufacture the BRTH of a kid just so he could have his own pet project to f with? Would he stand and watch as his subordinates died in front o' him? Would he laugh over people's graves? Let his followers sacrifice themselves when he could prevent it? Destroy a city just to test his power? Make people watch as he killed their friends? Witch stared at the spirit in shock. Why do you care so much? She shouted, before quietly adding, you're a hollow. His eyes softened, and Asen appeared behind the lieutenant holding a bottle of water and some disinfectant. Still holding Witch's hand, Shiro slowly sat down, bringing her down with him until both were on the ground. The Quincy placed the items on the ground between them before returning to the sideways city he shared with the Hollow. Just 'cause I'm a Hollow don't mean I'm heartless. The pale spirit spoke as he let go of his blade and picked up the water bottle. He popped the cap off with his thumb and adjusted his grip on her wrist to a much gentler hold. The lieutenant blinked in shock, so caught off guard she barely felt the water fall on her arm. Not all Shinigami are noble and good. Who says all hollows have to be cruel and monstrous? But, every hollow I've ever heard of has just wanted to destroy and eat. Hollows, by definition, are souls that have lost their hearts. They get holes, and become endlessly hungry 'cause nothing can make up fair losing your heart. But, just 'cause a hollow don't know where their heart is don't mean they can't find it again. The hollow managed to clear one of the Shinigami's wrists of BLD, and was now picking up the bottle of disinfectant. "This gonna sting," he warned before he poured a small amount over her arm. She winced, and the Zanpakuto smiled softly for a moment. Of course, just 'cause a hollow finds their heart don't mean they become a good person. Even if they were a good person originally, being a hollow, feeling like that and surviving in Hueco Mundo can change someone. I was lucky I became part o' King. He ain't the type to change if he became a hollow. He'd only eat other hollows, he'd watch over his friends and family, he wouldn't attack someone just 'cause they look tasty. Were you always like this? The spirit snorted. Hell nah. I used to be just as hostile as any hollow you'd find huntin' a plus, with the power of a captain. Then King accepted me, and I found my heart. I realized I was just alone, and scared o' being rejected. I made friends, and not just with King. A smile formed on Shiro's face. I became happy. And who were you friends with? She almost seemed scared of the answer. You. The Zanpakuto grunted. Melons. Knuckles. Pineapple. I don't know who you're talking about. An amused breath escaped the hollow. Che, forgot you don't know my nicknames, fair people. Ranjaku, Kensei, and Renji. The girl stared at the spurt for a moment before covering her mouth with her bloody hand and giggling. I can see how you got those nicknames. She realized how dirty her hand was, and lowered it with a saddened look in her eyes. What do you call me? The hollow rose his eyes from inspecting her wrist for a moment before flicking back down. Witch. You're amazing at Keto, and your Zanpakuto is Keto-based. Yeah, I can see where you would get witch from that. I like it. It makes me seem more menacing than I am. You're plenty menacing. I've seen you put more than enough recruits through the ringer to know that. Her eyes widened as he grabbed the cloth from his hilt. Aizen spent so much time having ya make up for him while he was gone without you realizing, you got pretty DMN good at whipping newbies into shape. It was fucking hilarious every time the rookies fresh out of the academy would try to walk over ya, 'cause they thought they were hot sheet. I used to sit back and laugh as you tore into about how Shinigami life ain't as easy as it looks in the books. The happy smile that had formed on the Zanpakuto's face fell. I miss those days. Layin' around in the sun while you trained with your squad, playin' pranks on shortstack to Shiro hell, even bein' a walkin' clothing rack fair you and melons while you went shopping. He went silent, and the lieutenant couldn't help but stare with wide eyes and her mouth slightly agape as the hollow carefully bound her hand in cloth. She watched his hands as they bandaged her hand, before moving on to his face, studying it intensely. He chose not to react. Looking over her arm one more time and confirming it was the best he could do, he let go before switching to her left hand and repeating the process. Sometimes, he hated that he couldn't perform Keto. He was only part of King's Zanpakuto, so he could only use the parts that he made up. Just like how Asen could only use Quincy techniques, Shiro could only use Hollow. Only King, the Shinigami part of their trifecta, could use Shinigami techniques. Only King could use Kaido to heal someone else. Luckily, Zangetsu learned how to fix people up through King's knowledge from Gochin's clinic and war experience. The process was slightly faster than last time, because she wasn't struggling anymore. He emptied the rest of the water cleaning her arm, and he mentally made a note to grab a change of clothes for her. She didn't react to the disinfectant this time, which was either a good thing or her being so stunned that she didn't feel the pain. He took just as much time bandaging her arm, because even though he knew the action was muscle memory at this point, he was worried about messing up on her. Once he was done, he let her hand drop and continued staring at the ground between them. I know what it feels like when the guy that makes up your world leaves you. Whatever response which was going to make froze in her throat. When King and I first met, I was angry, and lonely, and stupid. I thought the best way to make King stronger was to make him think I was the bad guy. I threatened him, took over his body, haunted his nightmares. He hated me. Every second was hell, but I was doing it for him. It's gonna make him stronger, I told myself. Who cares if he hates me, I'm just a hollow, this is the best way. Lies I kept telling myself. I couldn't stand it. Every time he shouted that he hated me, that he trained for the sole purpose of driving me away, that he kept himself up 'cause he knew he'd see me, it fucking hurt, like nothing else. It's a bit of a different situation, but I get wanting nothing more than having him back. Tears formed at the corners of Witch's eyes. You're probably gonna hate me, 'cause I got him back and you can't, but I won't complain. I'll hate it, but I won't complain. Use me like a punching bag, training dummy, doormat, whatever. I'll take dash, she slammed into him and flung her arms around his sides. The hollow blinked in shock, before his eyes widened when his shihakusho started getting wet. I can't hate you. She sobbed. You understand, if only a little bit. A relieved smile grew on Shiro's face before. He hugged her back, the small woman nearly being swallowed by his inverted clothing. His right hand rubbed her back soothingly and he rested his chin atop her head. She fisted her hands in his clothes, shook in his hold, and screamed into his chst, but he simply continued rubbing her back. She wept for over an hour, and Shiro just held her as she let everything out without complaint. The only time his soothing expression changed was when a guard came in to replace the one that had left. The hollow had glared violently at the newcomer, who immediately retreated out of the building. The Zanpakuto only shifted in his position when the woman in his arms paused in her bawling. He lightly held her shoulders and helped her back into a sitting position, then slid his hands down to hold her wrists. The spirit held up her bandaged wrists up for the lieutenant to see. Hey. I'ma be visitin' ya every day from here on out, so you better stop doing this, ya hear? I don't mind fixin' ya up, but I hate seein' ya hurt yourself. Witch sniffled and wiped her eyes as she nodded wordlessly. Oi, you better take that seriously, alright? If I see you're hurting yourself again, I'ma tie ya in bubble wrap and throw ya over my shoulder. Fragments of a giggle fell from her throat before a laugh slowly pieced itself together. The hollow grinned in accomplishment. Thank you, Hollow-kun. Call me Shiro. The lieutenant blinked. King gave me the name. Boring as F-, sure, but it's something. And that's what matters. Witch smiled in response. Then thank you, Shiro. A giggle popped out of her throat. Never thought I'd see the day where I'm friends with a hollow. A smirk fell upon the Zanpakuto's face. You better get used to it. You're gonna be seeing me every day, after all. She smiled genuinely, and the hollow couldn't help but smile in response. I gotta go. We've got a shitload to do, and we've just gotten started. He explained as he stood. Witch rose with him, before glancing at the locked cell door. I hope you don't plan on breaking the door down. The guards might send someone to attack you. Was thinking about it. The pale spirit admitted. I decided not to. The lieutenant with him jumped at the sudden shouts from the guards outside the building. She snapped to him. What's happening? I'm part of a dual-blade Zanpakuto. That's my other half. Grab in the keys. On cue, Asen appeared in front of the cell door through Hirenkyaku with a key ring held in his hand. The Quincy spirit silently looked through the dozen keys before taking one and slipping it into the lock with ease. With a soft click, the door was swung open. Hello, Hinamori-san. You may call me Asen. The girl looked between the two spirits for a moment. Kurosaki-san isn't good at naming things, is he? Dreadfully so. Fucking terrible. The Zanpakuto agreed. The lieutenant smiled softly. Then I guess I'll see you tomorrow. The hollow opened his mouth to answer, before his eyes passed over the inside of the cell once more. Gimme a sec. I'll be back. As confusion dusted the woman's face, Shiro boomed away in sonido. Thanks in no small part to how familiar he and King were with the division, it did not take long for the spirit to find what he was looking for. He re-entered the cell promptly, ignoring the knowing look on his Quincy counterpart's face. The confusion that had grown to cover Witch's face was replaced with shock as soon as she realized what he held in his arms. Because of this, she was left to stare as he sauntered past her and plopped the mattress he stole onto the stiff mat that she had slept on the past few days. She then gaped as he slid the mat out from under the mattress and stood it up on its side in front of the toilet. A frown marred his face for a second, before he punched the mat in a couple places and bent it so stood up more reliably. The hollow turned back to her with a wide grin. There. Now you got a bed, and privacy. Thank you. Welcome. See ya tomorrow, Witch. With that, the Zanpakuto pair left, pointedly ignoring the visibly shaking guards as the duo passed the terrified men. Seeing you reform your friendship with Hinamori Fukutecho reminded me how eager I am to reform my friendship with Sasakai Fukutecho. Asen sighed wistfully. You'll get the chance. We both know it, hell, King'll actively get you the opportunity. I am aware. The Quincy's lips twitched. We have been here for less than a week, and already things are better. The hollow glanced at his counterpart with a smile on his face before shifting his gaze to the sky. Yeah. He slid his hands into his pockets. For everyone. Indeed. The thoughts of the Zanpakuto trailed to their orange-haired wielder. For everyone. They could have returned to their wielder's mindscape instantly, but the pair decided to enjoy the walk over to Anohana's abode. According to their signatures, the orange-haired time traveler and his partners were already inside, in the bathroom, if the Zanpakuto's memories served them correct. If the duo slowed their strides, no one would know. Ah, cold water is nice. I sighed after downing half my cup. After facing off against Yama's Bankai, cold drinks were never as refreshing. I would have preferred if the bath water was also cold, but neither of the women I shared the tub with had been exposed to the ancient Shinigami's overwhelming heat. Sure, it wasn't at the level the head captain thought it was, but it was still as intense as the lower levels of hell. I briefly wondered if Yama's Bankai truly was powerful enough to burn away dimensions at its best. I knew from experience Bankais could become powerful enough to destroy dimensions, so it wasn't impossible. Yoruchi leaning into my right side dragged me out of my thoughts. I glanced down, and she had a content look on her face. I had to make sure to focus on her face. Ichigo, why didn't you tell me bathing with you was so nice? The workcat purred. According to you, doing anything with me is nice. I drawled. Fair. The goddess of Flash sighed happily. Unohana leaned up to whisper in my ear. I must admit, it's shocking to see how unaware she is of her feelings. I smirked and whispered back. It's more like she keeps getting distracted and never gets the chance for the realization to slap her upside the head. Knowing for sure that I was together with a second person is also making it strong on her. It's such an obvious answer who it is that she immediately shoots it down kind of thing. I see. What you talking about? The workcat mumbled, half asleep in the water. Nothing important. I hummed. All right. We remained in the bath a few minutes more before getting out. I sighed as I toweled myself off. So much to do, and we haven't even figured half of it out yet. There were still a lot of people who had to go through training that my Zanpakuto and I haven't thought about yet. Over half of the training regimes we've already thought about are vague directions at best. Kuratsuchi and Kisuke need to figure out and counter technology they've only heard of. The exile of the Urahara shop and the wizards needs to be lifted. We have next to no progress in organizing the opening assault. Then there was the matter of finding a way to keep the training secret from the Wandenrake until we wanted to reveal it. They would become aware that we're getting stronger just from the increase of Ryatsu, and strengthen themselves to counter it. We had some leeway in that a lot of things happening because of my coming to the Soul Society was already seen by Yhwach and Hashwolf. Some changes could come about that the Quincy would just write off as because of me, but revolutionary things like Zaraki unlocking his Zanpakuto or Toshiro finding out about the true power of his Bankai would be too much for the Wandenrake to write off as a natural occurrence. I ran my hand through my hair as I walked out of the bathroom, Yoruchi and Unohana behind me. The mocha-skinned goddess had foregone her jacket in a comfortable environment, and I had joined her by removing the coat wrapped around my waist. There was no chatter as we found our way to my nurse's office, each of us tired in our own ways. The raven-haired medic took her seat behind her desk, and silently continued with her paperwork. Yoruchi flopped onto the couch with the intent to have a nap, and I sat in front of the coffee table to continue with the plan. I unrolled the larger map of the Siriidii Asen had appropriated from somewhere and used some paper weights to hold the corners down. Luckily, the table was large enough that the second, smaller map of the Siriidii and the hand-drawn map of the Shattenbarich comfortably flanked the main chart I would be using. The map of Hueco Mundo made with Halibel's help was placed next to the smaller Siriidii graph. Unohana was fine with me snatching half a dozen pens, and I tossed them onto the middle diagram as I took out the scraps of paper acting as people from my coat. As always, I started with placing the Quincy down, because so long as we didn't do anything to change that, they would appear in the same places and travel in the same patterns. Larger scraps of paper with soldats scribbled on were placed at the edge of each division. It had taken hours going through my memories and listening to dozens of reports from Father Shinigami hundreds of times to get exact locations on the squadrons of exterminators. I took one of the pens, a red one, and carefully started marking the map with arrows and symbols to describe the movement, patterns, and actions of the foot soldiers. After jotting down the main points, I went over each again to double-check that I had everything right and to add anything I missed. Then I started on the Sternritter. Some were easy. There were more than enough accounts of some that scribbling out the actions were thoughtless. But others were near impossible. The whereabouts of Yhwach's personal guard were almost completely unknown for most of the war. Almost. It had taken an incredible amount of effort, research, and going over my memories countless times with Zangetsu, but I had managed to get a somewhat vague run-down of the actions of the guardsmen. Yhwach and Hashwolf were placed down, with a highlighted baby blue line marking their path. It took nearly 20 minutes, but I managed to finish with the Quincies. Each of the scraps in front of me were marked with a letter describing which Sternritter they were. Circles of red marked the areas Sternritter E was ordered to take out. The path of Sternritter F was bold and noticeable in black. Squares of navy blue were safe zones from the vantage point Sternritter L would take up. Yellow surrounded the path Sternritter G would take, marking the range of her ability. A black X inside of a sky blue box represented the hiding spot of Sternritter U. Sternritter Z's path was the most noticeable, solid red with black edges. It was a mess, but one easily understood by anyone who had studied to read maps like this. I began setting up our side with the people Zangetsu, and I had already figured out. The scrap marked with my name was slid into the only position I could take if we wanted to win. I hated it, but the tactician drilled into me by Asen and Kairaku said I had due. Kisuke was placed in Hueco Mundo, alongside the Espada. The home field advantage was essential, especially since soldats had only the most minimal practice in fighting on sand. I frowned at where I placed the espadas we had and shifted them around. The path the soldats and Sternritter J had taken was simple, a straightaway towards Las Noches. There were a lot of opportunities for ambushing on our part. The Wandenrake mostly deemed the Ehrenkar to be mindless beasts with a lot of power behind them, so Yhwach only sent one Sternritter to the endless desert to not waste powerful players. Jail had or will, I corrected myself, taken 2 squadrons of soldats with him. With each foot soldier being lieutenant class, the Quincy planned to overwhelm the extreme few Ehrenkars residing in Las Noches with numbers. But since Stark, a frighteningly good wave clearer, was still alive, the Espada could be positioned to whittle down the numbers before they reached the home of the Espada. Potentially, the Primera could take out all the soldats and leave the Sternritter by his lonesome to fight 5 of the most powerful members of the Ehrenkar species. Along with Kisuke's guidance and general paranoia, they could possibly take out the jail and rush over to join the main fight in the Siriitii before any real destruction could take place. Zaraki was best wandering around the Siriitii and taking out anyone he came across. The only problem was the path he would take. I couldn't risk him being hit by a BLD splatter from Zombie, or Love's Power, or taking unnecessary damage from crossing paths with Explode. He could be assigned a path that caused him to encounter fear, since the current Kenpachi deemed fear to be an even more useless emotion than confusion. I placed Zaraki's scrap of paper over the 11th Division and used a double line to scribble out his path. I paused a few times, but I managed to scribble out something that allowed him to take out Sternritters F, O, R, and Q. A moment later, I erased it, as the path had him run right in front of one of the Y Sternritters, and it was a complete unknown which yourself he would encounter. Yhwach had given the twins a path for each of them to cause chaos, but he left it up to them which would walk what path. Which meant it was a 50-50 chance that Zaraki would either encounter a fake Yhwach that he could cut in half, or a fake Yhwach that could cut him in half. And I would not take that chance. Then I noticed a yellow line and remembered that Sternritter T was tasked to fly a path in the sky instead of staying on the ground. I was less concerned about the power of her lightning, as any captain and most lieutenants would be able to tank it, and more concerned about the resulting effect the lightning would have on their ability to fight. I sighed heavily and rested my forehead in my palm. Kuratsuchi or Byakuya could keep her from safely using the skies. No, just about anything Kuratsuchi could put out would be something she can fry, and Byakuya would basically be giving himself a handicap by spreading Senbonzakura so thin. Yuryu could potentially shoot her out of the sky. Wait, no. She can counter his arrows, and he's more useful against other Sternritter. Kamamura won't work. He can reach her, but his Bankai is too slow to hit her. He can distract her, but that doesn't really solve the problem, especially since she's aware of his Zanpakuto's weakness. Even with his conditionary immortality, she could shock him into muscle failure. Shinji. Sure, she'd know what his Shurkai does, but that didn't magically give her the ability to work around literally everything she perceived being reversed. Damn it, no. We tried that once. She coated her body in lightning formed from Raisher, so we couldn't get in close, and we couldn't use Kido. I weaved my fingers through my hair in frustration. Over half of the Sternritter had been taken out by me, and that was only because my abilities don't give a shit who I'm fighting. In order for us to have any chance at victory, I could not leave the position I had assigned myself, meaning I was stuck until I had completed my one task. I sighed. Asen often told me that if a solution could not be found, solve a different problem. I raked my eyes over the maps in front of me. I landed on the paths of the Y Sternritters. I needed to figure out which twin followed what path. That would determine whether I could have Zaraki run the path I had come up with or not, along with give me ideas on what I wanted other allies to do. But how? No one knew who was where. Dozens of accounts confirmed that there were 3 Yhwachs in the war zone, and many others established that the twins played Yhwach until their deaths. As far as we knew, there was no time limit on how long the yourself ability could be active. In the few plans that I had managed to dig up in the aftermath, the twins had been ordered by their king to not shapeshift into someone else under any circumstances while on the battlefield. One twin copied Yhwach's appearance and memories. The other copied his appearance and powers. Neither could copy both memories and powers. There was no way to forcefully return them to their original forms. Directly encountering either ran the risk of encountering the one with the power, and thus ran the risk that whoever came up on them would be one-shot. Both had access, thanks to their Quincy powers, to blood veine and blood artery. Both could also use Quincy bows. Yhwach had ordered them to only use their basic Quincy techniques, and he limited himself in the same way, but that was irrelevant because I knew who the fakes were already. But I didn't know how to safely decipher which fake was the threat. One could be killed by any captain or lieutenant in a single strike. The other could kill any captain or lieutenant in a single strike. Yamamoto. Sending him out against the twins eliminated the risk involved, since the ancient captain would be strong enough to take out both. No, Yhwach ordered the twins to copy himself because he knew a rusty Yamamoto wasn't strong enough to take him out at his best. If the head captain managed to take out the twin with the power, the Quincy King would be alerted that Yamamoto had regained his power. He would have his soldiers switch gears to a backup plan, and even if they switched to a backup plan I know of, we wouldn't have the ability to change our own strategy to counter them. And even having someone to encounter one of the twins to find out which one they were was suspicious enough activity for Yhwach to turn things around on us. I needed to figure out a way to not only figure out which twin had the power, but eliminate one or both before they could alert their king. A pleasant feeling manifested at the back of my neck, and I was dragged from my thoughts. I made to twist my head, only for something to smack the back of it. Ah. Yoruchi denied. Stay still. You've been looking like you need a massage since you came here, and it's only gotten worse since you've started working on that map. I blinked, and what I now recognized to be the mocha-skinned goddess's hands returned to the back of my neck and resumed the massage. And you definitely need it. She mumbled. It felt good. Very, very good. It had been a little over 7 years since I last got a massage. Automatically, my eyes started to close from the feeling. A sigh left my throat, but not from frustration. Asen also regularly told me that I needed to relax. I glanced down at the maps in front of me. Something like this wasn't something that could be completed in a day. A low groan rumbled out from me as the goddess worked her magic. We were on a time limit, yes, but not a short one. No more being a machine, I reminded myself. Without any hesitation after that, I dropped the pen in my hand onto the table. Let me get comfortable, I requested, and the ex-captain obliged. Her hands lifted from my neck and I stood up, making my way to the couch as I removed my armor and zangetsu. I heard an approving hum from my masseur as I shrugged off my shihakusho before I kneeled onto the piece of furniture and laid down. It was soft and cushiony. Also a little warm from Yoruchi having napped on it. The woman in question shot off in Shuanpa, and came back before I even started to wonder where she had gone. She was holding a jar, and I remembered that the 4th Division kept a stock of massage oil. As she sauntered up to me with a wide grin on her face, I allowed myself to relax completely in the company of my 2 favorite women and inside what I had come to recognize as a second home. She straddled my waist, and I couldn't help but mentally chuckle with the knowledge that she loved the excuse, before pouring some oil on my back. The sound of the jar being lowered onto the floor was faint, a little bit because of the mats making up the floor and a little bit because of Yoruchi's extensive stealth training. Once her hands came down to truly give me a massage, I stopped caring. I had a lot of built-up stress, from 7 years of horrific war, almost non-stop combat, the mere idea of time traveling, all the preparations I had made to time travel, everything regarding preventing the Winter War, the preparations for the BLD War, and the hell of trying to not get found out by the enemy that was constantly watching us. And, somehow, the woman on my back was undoing all of it. For a moment, I thought about biting back my mess. Then Yoruchi rubbed a spot in just the right way and that thought was shot and buried. My eyes fluttered shut from the pleasure and I turned my head to allow the sounds coming from my mouth to flow out freely. Maybe having more stress just made the massage feel better. It certainly felt better than the one I had gotten in the brief interim between the Winter and BLD wars. Then again, that massage hadn't been delivered by Yoruchi, so maybe the goddess was just better at it. There was always the possibility it felt better because of my awareness of Yoruchi doing it. A knot that had been there so long I had forgotten about it came undone, and my mind blanked. What was I thinking about? The ex-captain ground her palm against a spot next to my spine, and something guttural rumbled out of my throat. The woman paused for a second, and lifted her hips for a moment. I didn't have enough brainpower to put any thought to it, and she continued soon enough anyway. She rubbed at something between my right shoulder blade and my spine, and I growled in pleasure. I made a promise to ask Yoruchi for a massage at least once a week here on out. Yes. She sighed. Apparently I had said that out loud. Great, saved time. And she said yes, so all was good. Now that out of the way, why did I feel a wet spot growing on the back of my hakama? Don't worry about it. The goddess answered quickly. So I was still talking out loud. She said not to worry about it. I couldn't think, so the potential meaning behind that statement flew over my head. I heard giggling. Was too far away to be Yoruchi. Oh, yeah, Unohana was here. The goddess responded to the giggling. I was still basking in pleasure and comfort, so I didn't care enough to listen to their conversation. It ended quickly. I think. Yoruchi had been massaging me the whole time, I wasn't really paying attention to anything other than that. I was suddenly being slapped lightly into wakefulness. What? I hummed. Yoruchi was very close. As in, pressing herself against my back and breathing into my ear close. How about we continue in the bedroom? She sounded impatient. I shrugged, my head still a bit sluggish. Sure. Hang on. Instantly, her limbs wrapped around me and I sat up. I blinked once I opened my eyes. Where's Unohana? Waiting for us in the bedroom, now come on. Alright, calm down. I waved as I stepped off the couch. Grabbing Zangetsu as I passed the sword was automatic for me. I didn't slip it through my sash, though. I was going to put it down once I entered the bedroom, so there was no point going through the hassle. Opening the door to Unohana's room was what brought me to full wakefulness. The woman in question was wearing her sheer white nightgown, and nothing else. What did you two talk about? I asked, dumbfounded. Giving you a reward you are in desperate need of. The raven-haired medic purred. Yoruchi, with her NTMT knowledge of the human body thanks to her stealth training, managed to lean in a way that threw off my balance before pushing against my back to get me to stumble into the room. In a display of speed and precision synonymous with the ex-captain, the door was shut and locked behind me so fast I barely felt the goddess hop off my back. I turned my head to shout at the workcat, only for the woman's lips to crash against mine passionately. I froze, and she pulled back with a soft smile on her face. It's kind of funny, how I thought you were the dense one. She sighed. I gulped. I could feel my resolve shudder at the look on Yoruchi's face. I feared for my ability to restrain myself. I gulped at the look in Yoruchi's eyes. The one that, under normal circumstances, I would match. However, these were not normal circumstances. These were confusing, stressful, time-travel-filled circumstances. And while both my heart and my disagreed, my brain knew that preparing for the BLD war took priority over Fanji Orochi and Unohana until neither could walk. The mocha-skinned goddess leaned in and gave me another searing embrace, reaching out with her right hand to grasp the back of my head and pull me closer as her tongue slipped into my mouth. I couldn't stop myself from embracing back, earning a wonderful from the workat. Unohana's actions this morning really did some damage to my resolve. Our mouths parted just enough for each of us to SCK in a breath before she crashed against me once again. Finding the position to be a little uncomfortable, I reached over my right shoulder with my left hand and pulled her to my front. Her legs did not remove themselves from my waist, and her left arm wrapped around the back of my neck as she tilted her head to deepen the embrace. I kneeled down onto one of the beds before lowering my torso until Yoruchi was on her back. We separated, and she moved my head to the left as she leaned down to embrace my neck. I rested my forehead on the bed as I tried my best to not give in to the increasing longing to keep the two women with me from sleeping tonight. Goddammit, just into next week. They're literally asking for it. There was Shiro, representing the voice of my D-. How did it go with Momo? I'll tell ya after ya, these two stupid. The goddess under me immediately noticed my inattentiveness, and responded by rocking her hips against mine. I grunted and failed to keep from grinding into her. The sound she made because of that was not helping. Someone crawled onto my back, hands roaming everywhere. If I remember correctly, Unohana whispered sensually into my right ear, the personalities of your Zanpakuto were based on your desires and instincts. What are they saying now? She finished by liking and sking on my earlobe. Shiro is telling me to screw you both until you can't see straight. My breath hitched as my nurse slid her body up and down my oil-soaked back. And Asen? Yoruchi ummed as she ground against my D-. He's not saying anything, I huffed, which basically means he's in agreement. 2/3 of your soul are telling you to rock our worlds. The workat purred. And you definitely want to, so why the hell aren't you? Oh, I don't know, because I have to prepare an entire army for the single bloodiest war in history, and I have 3 years to do it. I growled, though that was from the effort of not slamming my hips down into Yoruchi's. How does that answer my question? I have shit to do. I hissed through the two women palming my Urkn in sync. Indeed, and their names are Unohana and Yoruchi. The raven-haired medic sighed into my ear. My right hand shot down and slapped the mocha-skinned goddess butt, a breathy being my reward. Shiro. I mentally snarled. You know that wasn't me, King. I could hear his sheet-eating grin, and it set me off a little that he was right. I came to the realization that there was no way I was getting out of this situation without someone getting off, and growled lowly. Both women purred in delight at the sound. An idea popped up in my head, and a savage grin grew on my face, which brought an excited grin to Yoruchi's face. Oh. Has the beast finally come out to play? A game. What's it called? Are the girls walking tomorrow? You'll see. It involves a wager. Golden eyes shined mischievously. Oh, I love it when there's stakes. They're pretty simple. I win, we stop. You win, we don't. Hefty stakes there. The captain on my back hummed. What's the game? If I can make you pass out with my mouth. The grin on Yoruchi's face grew wider at my words. Well, don't you know how to get a girl excited? Does that include both of us? Unohana questioned. Sure. We'll get to that later. Right now, we need to fix the issue of you and I being overdressed. The ex-captain below me purred, clearly impatient to get the action started. I rested my palms on either side of her head, causing her to gape in surprise. She blinked up at me right before I crashed my lips onto hers. She ummed happily and wrapped her arms around my neck as her legs tightened around my waist. I gave in to my urges, and brought my hips forward to rub against hers. A far more pleased passed between her lips, muffled by my mouth. A measured slip of my knees, and my weight pressed against her core, drawing out a much longer and louder from the chocolate-skinned woman below me. A pair of hands rubbed my shoulders, and a mouth came close enough to my ear that I could feel the lips occasionally connect. "While you're servicing her, what shall I do?" she purred. I ended the embrace with Yhwach to turn my head enough for my nurse to see my eyes. "Wait your turn," I ordered. As I felt her shudder on my back, and something drip onto me from above, I returned my focus to the goddess. Although I was tempted, I didn't continue embracing her breathless. Knowing I could get so into this I could forget about the game, I instead leaned down to trail embraces down her throat. She seemed more than appreciative, especially once I brought my right hand down. Some perks of being a time traveler were that I already knew my partner's KNKS. For example, how Yhwach loved it when I ripped her clothes. I fisted the fabric covering her collarbone, and pulled, the suit she wore tearing apart easily under my strength. I both heard and felt her delight, through her happy giggle and how the wet spot between her legs grew. The wet spot would be dealt with soon, but I had something else to pay attention to. Ripping open her suit had the wonderful side effect of making her melons jiggle at the sudden freedom, and it had instantly captured my focus. Then again, it always did. Now that nothing was in the way, I was all too happy to embrace my way down to her chest. I tossed the fabric still held in my right hand away before I brought the hand to play with her left melons. The size was perfect, too large to fit in my hand, but just barely enough so that I wanted to try. And try I did. With her NPL poking the middle of my palm, I groped, massaged, and molded her BRST to my heart's content as my mouth endeavored to embrace every inch of her right melons, since I technically hadn't done that with her yet. She sighed and ummed without restraint, which was all the encouragement I needed to continue. Once my mouth got to her NPL, I sucked it between my lips and began toying with the strong nub with my tongue. I glanced at Yhwach out the corner of my eye, seeing she was breathing and miming from the combination of my hips still rocking against hers and my actions with her melons. An evil idea manifested in my mind, and I didn't even question whether it had come from me or not. A moment to pay attention to the timing of my hands, mouth and hips, and the mocha-skinned goddess twitched and ummed erotically as her legs squeezed and her hands tightened around the back of my head. I had slammed my hips into hers while simultaneously pinching and pulling her left NPL, and biting softly on her right. Her face, as always, was painfully RSNG, with her eyes rolling up slightly and her smile growing senseless for a wonderfully long moment. I lifted my mouth from her melons, a trail of saliva connecting my lips to her NPL, and grinned viciously once her eyes cleared. 1. I growled lowly. She gulped subconsciously, not yet having regained the faculties to process my statement, and snapped to my right hand as it slid from her melons down her stomach. She was too focused on my hand grasping the fabric of her leggings to spot my wolfish grin. She gulped again with a smile slowly beginning to grow as I relieved her of her last article of clothing. I leaned forward, purposefully skimming past her lips as I reached her ear. Now on to the main course. Both women shuddered. I had momentarily forgotten Unohana. She would continue to wait until I was done. I fixed my knees and prepared my hips. This move was always a little tricky, but pulling it off was always worth it. Once my right hand finished removing Yhwach's leggings, leaving her NDE, dripping wet, and impatient, I moved my left hand. Locking my hips, I slapped both my palms onto the chocolate-skinned goddess's butt cheeks, and slid her up the bed as she squealed in shock and pleasure. A moment later, and I was face to PP with Yhwach, with my hands holding onto her thighs firmly and her legs thrown over my shoulders. She opened her mouth just as I began, and whatever she was going to say melted into a loud mm. Her head fell back onto the bed and her hands found their way in my hair as she tried to push me deeper into her pages. I couldn't get myself to tease her, instead driving my tongue in between her folds and hunting for where I knew her weak spots were. One of her more joy-filled MMS became strangled when I found what I was looking for, and then I turned merciless. I let go of her left thigh with my right hand, completely unaffected by how she was squeezing me, and continued devouring her as I focused on her CLT with my fingers. Her screams were music to my ears. Her hips bucked, which momentarily brought her PP away from my face. I would not have that. I let go of her right thigh, reaching around her hips with my left hand and capturing her butt in an iron grip. I pulled her closer, and lifted my eyes to her face as I continued, with the possibility of her getting away now non-existent. She eventually looked down, and her golden orbs became trapped by my brown ones. It brought her over the edge. I did not stop. She tried to form words, probably to warn me that she was sensitive, which I already knew, or to ask me for a moment to breathe. She found herself unable to speak as I twisted my head and got her screaming in orgasm again. I lapped everything up with deadly efficiency, and kept going. She shook, and her legs twitched as I adjusted my right hand and speared my thumb into her pages. Her head fell again, her mouth open as her orgasm face came in full force. Her hips attempted to buck against my face, but I drove my face deeper as I pushed her hips closer with my left hand, keeping said hips from moving. Her screaming was suddenly muffled, and I looked up to see Unohana having left my back, now on top of the goddess of Flash. They were heavy in a makeout session, the medic straddling the ex-captain as their melons mashed together. What little I could see of their faces through the gap between their melons was of them locked in a tongue war. One of Unohana's hands was right in front of me, fingering herself vigorously with 2 fingers, and her other hand was unseen from my position. I was mildly saddened that I could no longer watch Yoruchi's face, but the view of my nurse abusing her Vgna and the BRSTS of the 2 women mashing against each other made up for it. I returned my focus to my task, wiggling my tongue as deep as it could go into Yoruchi's pages. I was rewarded another loud sharp spasm, and gushing liquid into my mouth. Ah, she was squirting. That meant she was pretty close to passing out from sheer pleasure. The heel of my palm ground against the CLT before me as I drove my thumb deeper and more vigorously into her snatch, making sure to time both with the movements of my tongue. Movement caught my eye, and through the melon's window, I saw Yoruchi's head LOL on the pillow with a glazed look in her eyes and a delirious smile on her face. The view disappeared a moment later as the captain of the 4th began attacking the ex-captain of the 2 ND's neck as her hands came up to play with the mocha-colored BRSTS. The former assassin's MMS melted to semi-conscious breathing from the overwhelming pleasure, and I went for the kill. I twisted my hand so that my middle and ring finger shot into her PP, while at the same time flicking one of Yoruchi's weak spots with my tongue. I was rewarded by a gush of fluid, a heavenly scream, and violent spasming. Unohana paused her ministrations and raised her torso, allowing me to see the goddess of Flash passed out on the bed, a dumb smile on her face and her body trembling from lingering pleasure. The sight brought me satisfaction, but I glanced up a little in remembrance that I wasn't done. I slipped myself out from under the mocha-skinned woman's legs and sat up. I felt wetness covering my mouth and slowly dripping down my chin, but I neglected to wipe it off. I was about to continue with Unohana anyway, so there wasn't any point. I pressed myself up against my nurse's back, feeling light shudders flow across her body. My right hand snaked around and captured her left BRST in its hold as I brought my mouth up to her right ear. "That's about to be you, you know." The raven-haired beauty gulped, and I saw her shudder in excitement. I released her melons and lowered my hand to hold her midsection before I picked her up with ease. Her breath hitched at the action before I lowered her down onto her back next to the unconscious ex-captain. Once she saw my face, another shiver went down her body, her gaze focused on my dripping mouth. She watched me as I grabbed her by the back of her thighs and lifted her legs to her shoulders. Seeing her cord glistening from her fingering herself, I smirked and leaned down. Wait. I blinked and raised my eyes to meet hers, seeing her sapphire orbs swirling with lust. It would be impolite of me to have you service me without reciprocating in kind. I was far too experienced with her to buy that she just wanted to be kind. You just want me to be rough with you now that I'm actively participating. I accused. Her eyes shined and she liked her lips. I do. Fine. Without warning, I shifted my grip to hold her by her sides and lifted her again, receiving a soft squeak in response. Far too excited to be gentle, I flopped myself down onto the bed next to Yhwach and placed my nurse down on my face. The raven-haired woman sighed in relief and pleasure as she sat up and gyrated her hips against my mouth. I growled and palmed her but with both hands, squeezing and molding it as I desired. Her sighs quickly became soft mess, and she suched from gyrating to grinding down. My mouth found its way to her pee-pee, and I wasted no time attacking it, assisting her in bringing her core closer by adjusting her position using my grip on her butt. Her weight shifted, and I felt my hakama come undone. She pulled the cloth down to my knees, where I proceeded to kick them off. Just like how I didn't hesitate to attack her pee-pee, she didn't hesitate to swallow my D-dash. She didn't waste time making a show of it since I couldn't see her, and she didn't take it slow, probably due to her own excitement. She grabbed the base, and inhaled half of my member on her first go, a wondrous combination of pleasured and aroused GG sounding from her throat at the action. In response to the wonderful feeling of her throating me like a mad woman, I turned it up a notch. My left hand rose to slap her butt, and I caught the cheek I slapped rippling in my peripheral. My right let go of her other cheek as it slipped down, my middle and ring fingers slipping in between her folds eagerly as they pumped in time with the movements of my tongue. Just like with Yhwach, it took almost no time at all to find Anohana's weak spots. When I did, I was gifted with the spine-tinglingly wonderful sensation of the raven-haired beauty taking the entirety of my member down her throat before miming and gang erotically. I released a guttural into her pee-pee as she came into my mouth. She deserved a reward for that. My pee-pee was halfway out of her throat when she paused from my adjusting my legs so my knees were up and my feet were flat on the ground. She immediately understood my intentions, releasing an RTC that displayed her excitement as she fixed her position. From the sound of it, her hands now rested on the bed on either side of my waist. Her mouth was positioned high enough that only my tip was between her lips, and her tongue was doing wonderful things to it as she waited for me to begin. I didn't have her wait long. I struck a weak spot inside her pee-pee with my fingers and tongue each as I speared my hips up, slapping her but at the same time for good measure. Her resulting as my D shot into her throat was loud, RTC, and filthy. A wave of liquid rushed into my mouth, and the corners of my lips curled up. Her persisted as I jackhammered into her throat while still devouring her. The vibrations of her throat, accompanied by its tightness, were bringing me close to the edge. I had gone a little easy on Yhwach because she was unaware of her feelings towards me, and her teasing was just standard wordplay. But Unohana had been fully aware of both her and my feelings, and had been physically teasing me at every turn. She was deserving of some punishment. The fact that she enjoyed such punishment was just incentive. I shifted my right arm so that my wrist was between her doughy cheeks and my hand was still vigorously slamming into her CNT with wet slaps. This gave me the freedom to reach around with my left arm to grab the back of my nurse's head in an iron grasp. She wouldn't be able to escape, even if she wanted to. She made a noise in response that was halfway between curiosity and anticipation. A moment later, I flipped us. My right arm supported her lower body while my knees came down to make sure I had proper support to continue FNG her face. A sound between a squeak and a that was much more excitement than surprise leaked from her throat. At the same time, something else leaked from a different pair of lips, and it was far tastier. Now that the back of her head could be supported by the bed under her, I moved my left hand again, sliding it around to fondle her melons. I growled, knowing she loved the sound, and rocketed my hips down into Unohana's throat, having far more power in my move thanks to the position. The noise that came out from her was somewhere between a loud GG, whorish scream, and RTCM, muffled by my PP in her throat. It was a filthy sound, sending pleasant shivers down my spine for several reasons, and encapsulated all of her happiness, pleasure, and arousal. And it was made all the better thanks to the position allowing me to drive even deeper down her throat than the previous position permitted. Her hands wove around my hips, groped my butt, and did her best in helping me put as much power into my moves as possible as I violated her throat exactly like she wanted me to. Not once throughout all this did I ease in my ministrations with her CNT. If anything, thanks to my weight going down towards her PP, my actions were increased in their effectiveness. I began SCSSRNG my fingers in her PP as my mouth left her core, suching my focus to her CLT, which had received little attention until now. Her legs squeezed my head, which was an amazing feeling, as I latched my mouth onto the nub and directed the majority of my attention to it. That action alone caused her to come again, and the vibrations of her throat as she tipped me over the edge. I snarled in pleasure as I drove my member into her throat as deep as possible, releasing everything that had been building up into her gullet. She was all too happy by the display, and equally as turned on from it. Gagging and slurping noises began as she twisted her head in an effort to take more of my D into her throat. Her tongue wiped my PP clean while 2/3 were still down her throat, and I felt one of her hands reach down to massage my ball in hopes that more of my spunk would come out. To her very audible happiness, I lifted my hips before I returned to pounding her throat like I hated her. I knew both from previous experience and the gush of liquid from her PP that she absolutely loved it. I jabbed my fingers into a weak spot of hers as my tongue reacquainted itself with the inside of her CNT, and received another loud MMM as she came. My left hand removed itself from her melons once something else for it to focus on came to my attention. I would have happily kept abusing her BRSTS until we were done, but I wanted to introduce her to more pleasure. But some preparation was required. And I had a wonderfully evil idea for how to prepare. My hand and mouth left her PP, and I used my left hand to sit up as I slipped my PP from her throat. She whined as her eyes remained focused on my D-, completely slathered in her spit to the point that it dripped, with threats of saliva connecting it to her lips. I brought my middle and ring fingers up to her lips. And was pleased to see she required no order as she took both into her mouth and SCKED them hungrily. There was a swirl of anticipation and curiosity in her eyes, clearly having no idea what I planned to do. Once I decided that my fingers were properly lubed up, I drew my hand back and brought the tip of my member to her lips once again. She happily locked her lips around my D-, eager to receive more of the same treatment as before. I obliged, snapping my hips forward. Without my hand and torso to hold her in place, her body jiggled from the force I used. The sight of her melons bouncing from the force as her body shook was heavenly. But what I was about to do would be more than heavenly for her. I leaned down with a smirk, lowering my right hand first to continue jabbing my fingers into my CNT. I then lowered my mouth, stabbing my tongue between her soaking lips and focusing on her weak spots. Finally, I took the spittle-soaked fingers of my left hand and wiggled them into her a-hole. The loudness and sensuality of her MMMS doubled, and I'm sure she would have been breathing if she could have. I toyed with the tight rim to loosen it before I drove my fingers up to the second knuckle into her hole. Her throat tightened around my D and vibrations rocked it as Unohana filthily, unprepared for such pleasure as I was sprayed by her CNT. Her hips, which previously were easily kept in place by my right hand, spasmed upwards as her legs squeezed as tight as they could around my head. Ignoring the pressure was simple, thanks in no small part to my unmatched durability. She remained frozen in that position for several seconds as she came harder than she had possibly ever, before loosening her hold and practically falling limp under me. But not completely limp. Which meant my job wasn't done. So I didn't stop, continuing to devour her PP while my hands worked on both of her holes and my PP continued abusing her throat. Almost instantly, I received another wave of liquid to the face, but I didn't slow. Her MMS slowly melted to half-conscious whimpers, and I jabbed my fingers in her but one more time, her juices dripping down from her CNT to mix with the saliva covering my fingers. Her legs fell from my head to the bed, and her hands dropped with soft thumps. With a soft grunt, I rose up, slipping out from Anohana's throat while I did so. I looked down, and was greeted by the sight of my nurse unconscious, with her eyes rolled back into her head. I released a sigh, immediately taking notice that I now was less stressed than I could actively recall ever being. A smile floated onto my face, and I carefully picked up the captain of the fourth before turning her around so her head was level with the still unconscious Yhwach. Unable to muster up any level of care, I grabbed my discarded hakama and cleaned both myself and my partners off, before tossing away the article of clothing once more. Feeling exhaustion slowly manifest in my body, I slipped in between the women, who immediately subconsciously curled into me as I pulled the blanket over us. Feeling content and refreshed, I wrapped my arms around the women flanking me, and closed my eyes to go to sleep. It came quickly. Toshiro Hitsugaya woke to immediately see a note on his nightstand. It was white, folded to stand on its own, and the words upon it were written in black ink. I am waiting in your living room. I will answer any questions you have once you join me. Asen. As he stared blankly at the paper, the longing to remain in bed and pretend the note didn't exist grew steadily. Kurosaki had proved to be an incredible source of irritation from just entering the Soul Society. Time traveling just made it worse, from explaining that he apparently met the requirements to be the next Soul King, manifesting his Zanpakuto spirits as if it were a menial thing instead of arguably the most difficult part of Bankai training, and now having said spirits enter his home. Toshiro had always been a responsible man, especially so since becoming a captain, and yet the orange-haired hybrid was making the white-haired prodigy tempted to ignore those responsibilities within a week and a half of entering his life. Just waking was far too early to be in need of a drink. Sighing heavily, the prodigy got up and began his morning routine. It was petty of him to purposefully take his time, he knew. But Kurosaki's Zanpakuto deserved it for sneaking into his home while the captain was asleep. He enjoyed his shower, double-checked that he brushed every speck of uncleanliness from his teeth, and even adjusted his clothes a few times to make sure they were comfortable. And then with a huff, he entered his living room. Just for the cherry on top, the prodigy didn't acknowledge the cloaked man with the unruly brown hair and orange sunglasses sitting before the captain's dining table. The icy captain pretended the spirit didn't exist as he journeyed to his kitchen to make breakfast. The responsible part of him made the spirit a cup of tea, but the petty part of him refused to go out of his way to make tea the Quincy would like. Once he was finished, Toshiro entered the dining room with a pair of cups and a plate of food, passing one cup to the spirit before digging into his meal. The Quincy silently accepted the drink with a nod of thanks. You said you would answer my questions. The manifestation nodded once again. How did you enter my home? The white-haired prodigy had no doubt that neither Kurosaki nor the spirit before him would do something like this without a good reason, so other questions took priority. As a manifestation, I can appear anywhere so long as my wielder has sufficient Ryatsu to support it. The farther the distance, the more Ryatsu it requires. Ichigo has sufficient Ryatsu storages that I could manifest nearly anywhere in Soul Society without issue. So the Quincy simply appeared within Toshiro's home. And Kurosaki's hollow could appear within his home on a whim. Wonderful. And why did you come to me today? The captains take priority in training. Strengthening the more powerful fighters is more valuable in preparing for war than bringing the weaker up to par. Then I can only assume my training begins today. The captain sighed. Why did you have the need to appear in my home, then? Why not confront me about this at the Squad 10 barracks? Efficiency. Your training will span the whole of this day. If you wish to journey to your barracks, it will be for the purpose of informing them that you will be training elsewhere today only. I have no choice in this. I regret to say that none of us can afford choice in our current situation. If we are not properly prepared for the Wandenrake, then the reason for Ichigo having come back here would have been in vain. The white-haired captain watched the spirit before him for a long moment, before he lowered his gaze with a downtrodden look. I understand you and your wielder must get this a lot, but was the war with the Quincy really that bad? Indeed, it was. Worry not for my exasperation, I am fully understanding that none here experienced the war, and thusly could not understand the truth of its terribleness. You are aware that the war lasted for 7 years? I am. Then I pray this assists in your understanding. After the opening assault, there was not a single day that went where someone did not die. The prodigy's head snapped up in shock and horror. On the good days, the deaths numbered in the hundreds. For the majority of the war, the deaths were only of either unseated or very low-seated Shinigami. If a month went by where no one of significance was killed, it was cause for celebration. I pray we do not have to repeat this too many more times before it is understood, but Ichigo and Urahara were truly the only ones remaining after the war. Toshiro blinked before staring into his cup as he individually processed each statement. In the Siriidii alone, there were several 100,000 Shinigami. In the Rukongai, there were several 100,000 more protecting the millions of denizens. All of them were gone in the time Kurosaki came from. According to Asen's words, and the average amount of citizens per district, entire districts were purged of those residing within over the span of, at maximum, 3 weeks. The thought churned his stomach. Then we must waste no time talking. He couldn't finish his breakfast with thoughts like that running through his mind. He dumped what was left in the trash and washed his dishes before turning to Asen, who was now standing. We're going to Squad 10 to inform them that I will spend the day training, then you will direct me to a suitable training area. The spirit nodded. I will remain hidden for most of the journey. The path that we will be taking will have us past the areas watched by the Wandenrake, and I most absolutely cannot be seen. I bear the visage of their leader, Yhwach, and if I am seen, our singular advantage will be completely done away with. I will give you directions though alterations to the environment, pay attention. The prodigy nodded and walked off, needing no directions to get to his squad. He rushed, having decided that he wasted too much time already being petty to Asen and asking questions. He grabbed the first seated officer he found, his 5th seat, and didn't bother with a greeting. I will be training on my own today. Relay the message to Matsumoto Fukutecho. The officer barely even got the chance to open his mouth before the prodigy turned and left. The thought of the potential destruction the Wandenrake would cause terrified the captain like nothing else. It also made him determined to become strong enough to stave it off. As soon as the icy captain left the Squad 10 barracks, he stopped to search for anything in the environment that seemed different. It did not take him long, if he wasn't just seeing things. There was a chip in the wall in front of the prodigy, off to the right, and shaped like an arrow leading to the right. He followed it, and he passed 4 intersections before he encountered another similarly shaped marking, pointing left. This would test his patience. It also was probably done on purpose to test his patience. Hell would freeze over before he would admit defeat to wall carvings. The journey ended up taking nearly an hour, most of it spent searching for the fingernail-sized chips in the wall. But, when it was over, he found himself within a dark, chilly cavern. It was a suitable training ground. The cold never bothered him, anyway. Asen was standing stoically at the opposite end of the cavern, a hint of pride in his gaze. I expected you to take longer at this point in time. So I'm already a step ahead. Good. The Quincy spirit nodded. Indeed. Our training will serve the purpose of strengthening your mind. The Quincy's arms came out from hiding within his cloak, and Kurosaki's smaller shuriken blade was clasped within the spirit's left hand. Your task is to learn how to use your matured Bankai while surviving until you enter it. The eyes of the icy captain narrowed. It had been drilled into the prodigy that Bankai was a last resort, only used if nothing else could defeat the enemy. He was generally uncomfortable with using it as soon as the battle began, but this training was for his Bankai specifically, so he could make an exception. Bankai, Daiguren Hyrinmaru. The white-haired Shinigami roared as icy formed over his body. The spirit gave no warning at all before twin arrows of sapphire screamed towards the ice wielder. Instinctively, Toshiro brought his wings in front of him, blocking the arrows easily. You have failed. The prodigy's mind stopped for a moment. His emerald eyes blinked in confusion and he allowed his wings to retreat to hang at his back as he stared at the Quincy. What? Exit your Bankai. But dash. This is part of your training. Leave your Bankai. The captain was completely lost as to what had just happened, what was currently happening, even, but he did as asked. Enter your Bankai once again. What? I am teaching you in how to use your matured Bankai. In order for you to properly understand how to use it, you must come up with the strategy yourself. You failed me as soon as I blocked your first strike. I did. Ask yourself why, and you may find the answer. The spirit's right arm practically melted into his torso, from how seamlessly it hid in the cloak. The Quincy's sword arm remained out, but his stance gave off the impression that he would only attack once the prodigy entered his Bankai. Which left the white-haired prodigy ample time to think over how he failed. He said the purpose of this training is to teach me how to use my matured Bankai, and he just explained I would have to figure out how to use it myself. He failed me when I blocked his strike with my wings, maybe it's how I blocked it. Perhaps I don't have my wings in my matured Bankai. Asen, will you give me an answer if I ask you a question? My response or lack thereof will depend entirely on the nature of the question. Well, might as well try it, then. Did you fail me because I blocked your strike with my wings? Yes. Do I have wings in my matured Bankai? Yes. That threw the captain for a loop. If he was failed for blocking with his wings, but not because he could not defend with his wings, then what was he failed for? Toshiro brought a hand to his chin in concentration. A thought came to him. If I enter my Bankai, will we begin this test again? Yes. And we will repeat this test until I succeed? Yes. Will there be any consequences if I fail? No. So, he essentially had indefinite test runs to figure out the problem and gather information. Then it was time to test the first theory. Bankai, Daiguren Hyrinmaru. Just like previously, 2 arrows shot towards the captain. This time, he kept his wings back and blocked the projectiles with his sword. The attacks broke against the blade, and Toshiro waited for any sound of failure. He was rewarded with Asen disappearing in a speed technique unknown to the prodigy. Before the captain could begin to contemplate why he had not failed yet, the cloaked spirit was in front of him. The white-haired Shinigami blocked the downward slash, and struggled to remain standing under the surprising strength of the Quincy's strike. Who suddenly stood straight and returned his blade to his side. You have failed. Exit your Bankai. Once again, the emerald-eyed man was left lost, blinking in confusion. The spirit turned around to presumably walk back to his original position, and the ice enshrouding the captain broke apart. The prodigy's mind was running at hundreds of miles per hour. He was allowed to block the arrows with his blade, but clashing against the spirit failed him. He compared the second test to the first. It was the act of blocking with his wings that failed him. Why? His eyes widened a fraction as he realized the difference. When he blocked with his wings, he lost sight of his opponent. With his blade, his eyes retained the ability to watch the spirit. But the trick couldn't be basic combat tips like that, otherwise he wouldn't have failed when Asen clashed blades with him. Or was it? Toshiro had been struggling under the pressure behind the strike, he was essentially at his opponent's mercy in that moment. Wait. He was correct, it couldn't be basic combat, because the captain couldn't have anticipated the strength behind the spirit strike. The failure was in allowing the spirit to clash blades with him when he was unaware of the Quincy's strength. A theory formed within the prodigy's mind, and he thought back to the first test. He had failed because he blocked his sight of the opponent, losing the ability to keep track of their movements. In the second test, he failed when he clashed blades with an opponent whose strength was greater than his. In both instances, he lost control of the fight. Time to put the theory to the test. Bankai, Daiguren Hyarinmaru. The white-haired Shinigami breathed again. The arrows flung at Toshiro, and this time he flung a narrow wave of ice at the projectiles, only wide enough to defend against the cerulean streaks of light and allowing him to maintain sight of his opponent. Once the attacks dissipated, Toshiro shunpaed in time with his opponent, darting to the left and shooting back a low wave of ice to trap the spirit's legs. It failed, and Asen's blade stabbed forth to fire a volley of arrows at the captain. The ice wielder shot to the right, moving his left wing to cover his body, but not block his sight. He caught the hint of a proud smile twitch onto the Quincy's spirits, and that all but confirmed the prodigy's theory. So his mature Bankai required him to maintain control of the battlefield. He doubted the spirit would inform him of why, so that meant his only method of acquiring the knowledge was through passing the test. The Quincy stopped randomly, causing Toshiro to stop as well. It seems you have understood how to use your matured Bankai. Maintaining control of the battlefield. The captain confirmed. Now to see if you are up to the task of maintaining control long enough for your mature Bankai to be activated. The white-haired Shinigami glanced over his shoulder, seeing the ice petals floating between his wings completely undamaged. This is going to be a long test. If I remember correctly, it takes an hour for all the petals to break. Impressive, considering the resulting feat of forcefully aging me. It's not permanent, is it? It is not, though you must wait the same length of time if you wish to enter your mature Bankai again. Fair enough. I imagine the time is only reduced by reducing the amount I need to age or increasing my Ryatsu storage to charge my energy quicker. I pray that, in this timeline, you live long enough to confirm that. The emerald orbs of the prodigy hardened and he shifted into a ready stance. I pray I become strong enough to. The spirit slid into his own battle stance and the fighters locked eyes for a long moment. And then they shot forward in their respective speed techniques. I woke up, and I just felt inexplicably happy. Well, it was pretty obvious why I was happy, actually. Although I had, and still have, more important matters to get to, I couldn't deny that I needed last night. Both the massage and what came after. My body was feeling better than it has been for a long while, and my mind was clear and undisturbed by nightmares or memories. I wasn't even feeling the urge to get out of bed and wake up fully as quickly as possible, I was just content with staying in bed, my arms around my women. The sun was bathing the room in a warm, golden light. My partners were curled into my sides with their heads somehow having moved to my chest while I was asleep. My muscles no longer ached from sheer stress. I was just happy. I rolled my head on the pillow to glance down at the women in my embrace, letting myself be too lazy to pick up my head. As always, Unohana was the picture of elegance, her face having softened with her lips in a soft, satisfied smile and her hair spreading out around her. Yoruchi, and it made me want to laugh just thinking about it, looked like a cat in the middle of a nap. Her fingers and hands hung down, kind of mimicking paws, and a lazy smile was haphazard on her face. I couldn't help but brush my fingers down their backs. They curled and more at the action, which made my smile grow. I watched them, enjoying how the golden light washed over them and made them glow with beauty. Yoruchi was the first to stir, nuzzling into me as she yawned. I was content with watching silently as she sighed while stretching her back and arms, making measure to move as little as possible. Morning. I rumbled, which caused the workcat to look up at me as a smirk slowly grew on her face. Good morning to you, too, Ichigo. Well versed in Yoruchi's quirks, I didn't react to her half-asleep subconscious teasing. I did glance down at her fingers as they lazily danced up my torso, though. When were you gonna tell me you were a sect god? I hummed, too happy and content to try avoiding questions. My tendency to brag kinda died in the BLD war. I mumbled. Besides, the only two that needed to know now do. The mocha-skinned goddess purred. You're goddamn right we do. She proceeded to lower her head back down to my chest as she snuggled into a comfortable position. As much as I'd love to lay in bed curled up with you all day, I know you have plans. She finished. I sighed, bringing my hand up to run my fingers through her hair. Her happy smile grew and she tilted her head a little to give me better access. Yup. So what's on the agenda? Asen is helping out Toshiro today. From the feel of it, the old man is inside his house, which is bound to PSS him off. But, Asen's riddles are good for him. He needs to be quick thinking to properly use his matured Bankai, and old man's sheer vagueness will give him the push he needs. I glanced down to watch as the ex-captain's hair parted between my fingers, and soaked in how the light mixed with her violet locks. I'm gonna murder Zaraki into shape starting today, so I guess it's date night with Unohana. Oh. Where are you taking her? Wherever I'm gonna take Zaraki, so she can both help me murder him and keep him from actually getting murdered. That doesn't sound all that romantic. It is when one of her favorite activities is fighting. Ah, keep forgetting about that. Don't worry about it, it's pretty easy to forget, since she's only fought once in the past few hundred years and it was after I forced her to. When is my date? She purred. I've got an idea, and I'll be working on the details while I train Zaraki. Any hints for me on what to expect? Halloween is in a couple days, isn't it? Her eyes gleamed with anticipation. Oh, it already sounds like fun. Make sure you don't get too excited. I might disappoint you if you do. Oh, I doubt that, when I know how good you are at using your head. My face warmed at her intentional phrasing, but it passed quickly. She was still mostly half asleep, and was easier to deal with. What are you gonna do while Unohana and I are out? I asked. She yawned and stretched her back again before snuggling back into my side. I'm gonna keep the bed warm for you. With how well last night went, all I want to do is lay in bed and enjoy the feeling. Ah, DMN, now you're making me want to stay with you. I sighed as I straightened my head so I was staring at the ceiling. Please. I wanna. Do more than just lay. Bad kitty. I mumbled, a smirk dusting my face. Don't you mean naughty kitty? Sorry, but I can't get into a fight with Zaraki if I'm horny. I'd like to see the outcome of that. Unohana spoke up, apparently awake. My eyebrow twitched. Oi, the only Kenpachi I'd ever F is you, don't even think about that. Fine. Then I'll think about how you'd F me. Though, after last night, I fear my imagination may fail me. You bet your butt it will. I huffed before releasing the women from my hold and sitting up. Since both of you are awake now, time to make breakfast. You wait until both of us are awake before starting breakfast. Yoruchi asked. More like I can't force myself to stop staring until you do. I corrected as I stood. Wow, and I thought I already knew why I fell for you. The workcat mumbled. Why thank you. I chuckled. You deserve a fried fish for that. I didn't even need to be looking at the goddess to know her eyes were wide. I love you. She breathed. I love you too, I automatically responded, but you're not getting extra fish out of me that easily. A laugh slipped out of me upon catching her soft "damn it." I grabbed a spare pair of hakama on my way out the bedroom, ignoring the bundled up pair in the corner that reeked of section. Considering I was about to brawl with Zaraki alongside Unohana all day long, I took measure to enjoy the morning peace while I could. As much as I loved fighting, it was difficult to truly enjoy it when I couldn't go all out without killing somebody, so it usually left me more stressed. True to my word, I grabbed a fish from the ice chst and the necessary supplies to fry it before turning the stove on. King, why the hell did you stop? You know why? Yeah, and it's the flimsiest excuse I've ever heard. We do have a lot of sheet to do. That ain't what's stopping ya and, you know it. What do you want me to say? I want ya to stop believin' ya ain't worth it. It's strong. He sighed, and I didn't have to peer into my inner world to know his hands were angrily passing through his hair. I know. He growled. They're fucking loud, I know, and they've got no right to make that much sense, but you've got to ignore the voices. How loud they are and how much sense they make aren't why they're strong to ignore. That silenced him for a moment, but he figured it out quick enough. Unohana and Yoruchi can't pull you out of your downward spiral if they don't know you're in one. I am going to tell them. Going to is the important part there. You don't need to wait, you want to. You think you deserve the hell, but you know you don't, so you only torture yourself a little bit. He snarled. I bit my lip. Fine. Then I'll move up when I was planning to tell them. After we're finished with the captains. I relented. No. Today. We can go back home after we're done with the captains. The Wandenrake are a lot less strict in watching the world of the living, it'll be easier to not get caught. I tried to reason. If you don't tell M tonight, I'm talking over. He threatened. I'll stop you. Fine by me. They'll know something's up, and we both know you can't say no to them fair sheet like this. I glared at the fish I was frying, lamenting at the fact that he was right. My jaw tightened and my glare hardened, the voices arguing that getting everyone ready was more important than getting my head on straight. King. Don't listen to them. They just want to drag you down. You know that. I bit my lip, dark memories flashing behind my eyes. King, focus on me. They get worse when you give M your attention, ignore M. Say it. One of my hands tightened around one of the utensils I was holding enough that the tool creaked. Say it, King. You know it makes M go away. I swallowed the lump in my throat, but it just made my throat tighter. FNG King. Abandon your fears. He was yelling, but his voice was quieter. Move forward and never stop. His familiar echoing speech was being swallowed by the others. You'll age if you pull back. It was almost as if he was screaming through a mouthful of cotton. Ichigo. I blinked at the questioning voice. My head snapped to the left to see Unohana standing next to me, worry swirling in her eyes and a palm on my chst. What's wrong? I seked in a breath. A little quickly, I must not have been breathing during the attack. I released it slowly and closed my eyes for a moment before refocusing on the fish, learning that I hadn't burned it while I was stuck in my head. That's a bit tough to answer. My voice was quiet, I felt exhausted despite knowing I wasn't. There's a lot of stuff wrong. Then it isn't tough to answer, is it? I snorted softly at her minor joke. It's not going to get easier if you keep it bottled up. Talk me through it. Her hand came up to rub my back for a moment, before she suched it up to dance her fingers up and down my spine. I focused on the feeling. Part of it is stuff you already know. Getting everybody ready for the Wandenrake, making sure they don't become aware of what we're doing, figuring out what to do to beat them. Even with Zangetsu able to manifest and help lighten the load, it's still only 3 people handling the training of dozens, and each of those people required different training for different things. Like, Zaraki's training is simple, but is going to take up a lot of time. Meanwhile, Byakuya's training is changing his outlook and rearranging his priorities, which could take anywhere from an hour to a week and is far more mentally exhausting than physically. I haven't even started on figuring out what to do for the lieutenants, and getting the unseated Shinigami to a point where they're not cannon fodder only just now crossed my mind. Not to mention, as Asen reminded me the other day, since the Winter War was prevented, We're no longer in a situation where Yama's authority is greater than Central. Sure, those jackasses haven't been replaced yet, but once they are, the first thing they're gonna do is remind us that they hold all the political power. While those are all valid points, something is telling me that's not what was clouding your mind earlier. The raven-haired woman hummed as she stepped behind me and wrapped her arms around me. I appreciated the gesture greatly. I'll tell you both tonight. I sighed. I need to be completely aware for today's training, and that conversation will tire me out a lot. You understand that you have now made it so that you cannot get out of telling us. That was the point. I confirmed. We fell into a comfortable silence after that. It was nice, feeling Unohana hold me from behind while I worked on finishing breakfast. My body was warm, both from her and from Shiro sending out soothing waves through my body. It angered Shiro more than it did Asen that their attempts to calm my panic were never as successful as Unohana's or Yoruchi's. To that same extent, both halves of my Zanpakuto were calmed by the fact that there was anyone that could calm me down. For the past 5 years, I mostly just was calmed by the fact that anyone was there. PRD. The food finished quick enough that I could stop that train of thought before it got any real traction. Just in time, Yoruchi was stalking into the room, her eyes half-lidded and her nose turned up to follow the smell of the fried fish. Unlike Unohana, who was wearing the basic Shinigami uniform, Yoruchi was naked. I ignored it pretty easily, she usually was naked. She wasn't an XHBTNST, but she definitely preferred to be without clothes. I once asked her about it. She had explained that because of her cat form, she felt more comfortable whilst naked. I set the table, and we ate in comfortable silence. They sat closer to me than normal. Unohana most likely did it intentionally, to provide more comfort, while Yoruchi probably did it for her own comfort. The gentle nurse sat close enough that I could feel her body heat, reminding me of her presence. Yoruchi was halfway in my lap, only leaning out to devour her fish. I smiled as I watched her tear into the meal happily. As I sipped my coffee, I had added some sugar today, the sweet taste did a wonderful job of clearing my mind. I slipped my right arm around the wererat's waist and tugged her closer. When she snuggled into me in response, I closed my eyes to fully take in the sensation. We finished eating far quicker than I expected to. I had managed to eat 3 mouthfuls of food, and I completely finished my coffee. Unohana and I had gotten dressed pretty quickly, while the ex-captain had wasted no time in curling up under a blanket on my bed. I smiled at the sight. What is the schedule for today? The first Kenpachi asked. Date night. I hummed. One of her eyebrows raised in time with the corners of her lips. Oh. And what shall that entail? Undoing your sin. A lovely pleased sigh fluttered out of her. Yoruchi-chan was right. You do know how to get a woman excited. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, I know. Come on, last time it took a week for us to get him back up to full strength. She frowned as she followed me out the front door. That is an uncomfortably long time. For 2 captains to be in an undisclosed location for a week is curious behavior. Not only would the Quincy become suspicious, but the Central 46 as well. Well, last time we didn't really know what the best method was, and I was only fighting with about 1/4 of my strength. 1/4 of your strength? That's a long dash. I paused in my stride and mentally double-checked how far we were from the 11th Division. Actually, we have the time. This is going to be a little confusing, so bear that in mind. Go on. So, starting off, you're aware that my shurikai was different before and after I time-traveled, right? Though I am only aware of your shurikai from rumors, they spoke of a completely different weapon than the pair you wield. She confirmed. Well, for a long time, I was under the impression that Shiro and Asen were completely separate from each other. When my Shinigami powers first were awakened, Asen suppressed Shiro in an attempt to make me more in tune with my Quincy powers. This was because Yhwach was such an overwhelming threat that Asen thought the best way to keep me safe was to make it so that Yhwach didn't deem me an enemy. So, until about 2 years into the BLD war, I was only fighting with my Quincy powers masquerading as my Shinigami powers, and the occasional power boost from my hollow powers leaking through. Furthermore, I didn't know how to control my Ryatsu, so I was leaking it everywhere, and I didn't have an Asachi. Unohana became confused at that. You battled with a sword capable of entering both Shirkai and Bankai, but it wasn't an Asachi. How is that possible? Funnily enough, it was because of how Asen was keeping up the illusion that he was a Zanpakuto spirit. Using his Quincy ability to draw in and condense Raisher to a point it becomes physical, Asen used my Ryatsu to manifest Shinigami robes, and my blade. Looking back on it, I was pretty dumb to not realize that I was the only Shinigami whose Bankai changed their clothes. And the only Shinigami who could decipher how much of their Ryatsu they have left based on how much of their clothes are left. Excuse me. Since my clothes were essentially just my condensed Ryatsu, when I started running low on Ryatsu, my clothes started eroding away. Oh my. That must have been quite the sight. I rolled my eyes again. Moving on, I eventually did manage to get an Asachi, and unlock the full powers of my Zanpakuto. About a year and a half into the BLD war, the Zero Squad came down from the Royal Palace. Still pisses me off that they only came down because the Wandenrake finally started hacking at the barriers to the Royal Palace, but whatever. I mumbled. When they came down, they offered to take some of us up with them for training, and ended up taking Renji, Rukia, Byakuya and I. Rukia unlocked Bankai because of it. Renji's situation confuses the shit out of me. Byakuya was taught the difference between Shirkai and Bankai, and I basically rebuilt myself from the ground up. Using Ichigo's words, my foundation was made of chains, and needed to be melted down into steel. I found out the truth of my Zanpakuto, accepted it, got an Asachi, some pretty badass clothes, some training in how to control my Ryatsu and how to actually use my powers. I see. A Shinigami crashed through the wall to our right, slamming into the stone on our left before slumping down unconscious. A wooden sword was held in his right hand, and I mentally approved that it was still in an iron grip despite his state. This is Fenji annoying. I heard Zaraki shout. How the F am I supposed to talk to my Zanpakuto spirit if you sheets are so weak? Maybe find Ichi-chan. Yachiru squeaked. I would if I could. But the BSTRD can hide his Fenji Ryatsu now. I'd just be running around for hours screaming his name, and that won't help jack shit. Or maybe you wait for me to come to you, like I told you I would. I questioned as Unohana and I stepped onto the Squad 11 grounds. Zaraki's infamous manic grin ripped across his face. Looks like that speak of the devil sheet is true after all. I stepped up to him, and not caring that he had a good 5 inches on me, punched him into the ground. FNG dumbass. I growled. We're trying to not let the Quincy know we're onto them, not scream it to the goddamn Soul King. Oi, I didn't say CRP about those cowardly wimps. You shouted for everyone to hear that you're trying to talk to your Zanpakuto spirit. You know, the one you aren't supposed to be aware of for 4 FNG years. The eye-patch-bearing captain squinted his visible eye and seemed to contemplate for a long moment. Sheet, you're right. This hiding the time travel CRP is irritating. I huffed. Yeah, and it's only gonna get worse from here. Come on, I just thought of where we're gonna help you get your Zanpakuto. The current captain of the 11th stood up and followed behind me alongside the first. Where are we going? He asked. My training spot where I helped out Unohana. Little bit 'cause irony, mostly the fact that it's one of the most private spots in the Seriidii. Okay, what are we gonna do? Unohana and I are gonna take turns beating the sheet out of you. Then we're gonna heal you. And then we're gonna do it again. Repeat until all of your stupid but self-restrictions are gone. What do you mean, stupid but restrictions? I can enjoy fighting a hell of a lot more people 'cause of it. Go ahead. I permitted. Unohana didn't hesitate to hop up and sock him in the back of the head. Hey, the F was that for? You can stop bullshitting yourself. You don't want to fight anybody that's willing, you want to fight the strongest person you can, just like Unohana and I. There's a reason Unohana and I share the ideal that the best fight is one you don't have to try to make fun. You're more powerful than Unohana, and you can cut her down faster than she can keep up at your best. That doesn't mean give her time to heal, or hold back on your swings. That means she ain't good enough for you, so you move on to someone else. She did the same thing to everyone before you, and I've done the same to everybody. What if I run out of people to fight? You won't. You weren't around to hear it the first time, so I'll repeat myself. There are only 3 people that are powerful enough to make me use Bankai. Only 2 of those people I need Bankai against to keep up with. Neither of those 2 are anyone in the Seriidii, and none of those 3 are you. How am I gonna fight them if I don't know who or where they are? I was talking about how you can fight me, dumbass. Oh. We remained in silence until we entered Kisuke's training ground. I took them to the healing springs, and gestured to the rocks around the small pool. We're gonna be hacking and slashing at each other for as long as I feel comfortable with, so if you don't want anything getting effed up, put it here. Unohana immediately stepped up and started removing her captain's robe. What I mean, as long as you feel comfortable with. We're trainin', aren't we? Zaraki whined. As much as I would love to get into a week-long slaughterfest with the 2 of you, that would raise the suspicions of a lot of people we don't want getting suspicious. So shut up and get ready. I was getting tired of his questioning. Especially because he normally doesn't question CRP. Ichigo. My eye twitched as I turned to Unohana, who had removed both her captain's robe and the obi she was known for wearing. How bloody do you think this spar will become? I'd rather not overwork the dry cleaning company. I was about to ask what she meant by overworking the dry cleaning company, but then I remembered that we had really been putting them through the ringer these past few days with thoroughly effed up clothes. You and I should be fine for a few hours. Until Zaraki starts really breaking past his seals, all we'd need to worry about is his BLD splatter. Oi, you're talking like I won't be able to hack you 2 up, the ragged captain argued, having completely removed his top. You're definitely not gonna be able to cut me until you get your Shirkai, and with how much you've suppressed yourself, you're not gonna be able to land a blow on Unohana for a while. I passed my eyes over the 2 captains. Zaraki was currently only wearing his hakama, with his unsheathed sword resting on his shoulder. The sheath was lying on top of his captain's robe and shihakusho. Unohana kept her shihakusho on along with her hakama and sandals, but otherwise had removed everything. Yachiru was playing with the sheath of Minazuki. Oi, Yachiru. The pink-haired spirit immediately stood to attention at my call, albeit mildly confused. I noticed the confusion also dusting the faces of the other 2, but I ignored them. You excited? I could see her confusion grow incredibly, before realization cleared it all away. Her pink eyes sparkled. Yep. Thank you, Ichi-chan. I smirked. Of course. I hate it when I see situations like you and Zaraki anyway. The F, do you mean, Ichigo? The ragged captain sounded ready to forego the battle and go for the kill. His immediate reaction made me smile all the more. You'll understand when we start hacking at those seals. Everyone ready? The first nodded, clearly keeping calm through her awareness of my knowledge. Zaraki was glaring at me, obviously suspicious, but lifted his sword from his shoulder. Sure. He growled. I smiled widely. Great. I was instantly in front of the eye-patch-bearing captain, booting him in the face with hopefully enough force to knock off his famous eye patch. He was flung across the grounds, skipping along the dirt until he crashed against a rock formation. Based on the explosion of yellow Ryatsu immediately following, I was successful. Unohana, I get the first turn. Get your Kaido ready, he's gonna need it pretty DMN soon. He wouldn't be able to grow much with short skirmishes, won't he? The captain of the fourth seemed deeply confused. With the time limit we've got, we have to emphasize efficiency over fun. So, what we have to do above all else is show off the gap between him and us. Make him focus on that difference more than the battle. As I stepped forward, Zaraki lunged out from the rock formation, a manic grin on his face with his scratchy laughter filling the air. His blade was above his head, and he brought it down only to have it stopped by my left forearm. I managed to catch the falter in his grin just as my right fist rocketed into his chest. I heard multiple ribs crack and break right before he shot into the ground. There was hardly a moment for the dust to settle before he sprang up again, ignoring the potentially fatal injury. His sword was coming up in a diagonal slash, so I drew Shiro's blade and met his strike. As soon as the two weapons collided, mine pushed his back, crashing the back of his blade into his chest before I dragged him along the ground and through a pillar of rock. Seeing that he refused to go down, I narrowed my eyes and punched his face into the ground with my free left hand. He bounced up for a bit as the ground broke, and he tried to get up, but only pushed himself into a BLD-filled coughing fit. I sheathed Shiro's blade as I turned around to take a seat next to Ichiro, Unohana already coming up to get him back into fighting shape. I sat down next to the Zanpakuto spirit, and automatically began petting her head like she told me she loved a few years ago. She nuzzled into my palm. "I'm really happy that you're doing this, Ichi-chan," the pink-haired girl reaffirmed. "I know. I just wish helping out you two was the only reason I was doing this." Her eyes stopped gleaming as the dark pink orbs dropped to the ground. "You said you and that Kisuke guy were the only ones to survive. That means Ken-chan died. He lost." I lowered my hand to rub her shoulder comfortingly. "It ain't because of you, don't blame yourself. I wasn't there when he died, I was in the world of the living at the time, but I heard what went down. He was in Bankai, using its full power. The Sternritter he was fighting just had some stupid powers that made him nearly impossible to kill, especially in a long fight. It was difficult, but I avenged him by killing the Sternritter that did him in. I'll make sure that doesn't happen, alright? It's a promise." Ichiro looked back up at me, meeting my eyes before a smile began to grow on her face. "You're already doing so much, but, thank you, Ichi-chan." Instead of speaking, I just nodded before we both turned to the captains battling. Like I had said, Zaraki couldn't hit Unohana, who was weaving around him and leaving a laceration upon his body with nearly every movement. His infamous grin was replaced with a deep frown, and I could tell he was focused on trying to hit his opponent over anything else, even trying to give up dodging just to put more effort into SWNGNG his sword. From what I could glimpse with her darting around, Unohana was also frowning, probably from finally seeing the difference between his full-released self and as he was now in its entirety. Due to the fact that Unohana's power was focused around extending the fight instead of ending it, their match was a lot longer than mine, which was more of a curb stomp than anything else. By my estimate, it took about 10 minutes before Zaraki fell to a knee from BLD loss. Once he did, I came up, palmed the top of his head, and flooded his body with Kaido. As his wounds closed up, I watched his face. His grin was long gone. His eyes were contemplative. His body was no longer tense with anticipation, and his gaze was locked onto the BLD on his skin. The BLD that was only his. His grip was so tight on the hilt of his sword that his knuckles were white. The chipped blade of his sword it couldn't yet be called a Zanpakuto was clean of BLD. Once he was back up to fighting condition, I lifted my hand and backed up as he stood. He watched me for a moment, before his eyes narrowed as he realized I wasn't going to draw Zangetsu. Silently, the current captain of the 11th lunged forward with his blade cutting across the air. Good, meant that he already was focused on just trying to close the gap between he and us. I met his lunge with my fists, strengthened by Hiero. His sword sparked against my collarbone as my knuckles pounded against his body. He coughed BLD, but still tried to let loose his own fist against my face. I felt one of his fingers break, but I didn't so much as twitch as I kept punching away. He backpedaled, but I stayed close. His serrated blade came up to slash at my eyes, but once again stopped in its tracks upon contact with my body. My left hand broke his jaw. My right, one of his ribs. I kicked out and shattered his right hip bone. His weapon swung out to get me to back up, but I just punched it back before continuing the onslaught. I broke his nose before I hit him with a right cross and sent him to the ground again. He didn't get up, so I huffed and retreated to sit next to Ichigo again. Unohana was already kneeling by his side with Kaido lighting up around the battered captain by the time I sat down. The pink-haired spirit was frowning, and I could tell her unhappiness wasn't from how badly her wielder was getting beaten. I began petting her again. It's all right. He's already stronger. It's slow right now, but he's getting there. She nodded at my words, but her frown didn't lessen. I turned to watch the first Kenpachi healing her successor. I just wish I knew how to speed all this up. Last time, we just fought like maniacs with the idea that eventually all of his self-imposed seals would break away. That if he kept on losing, he would keep on shedding them away until there was nothing left holding him back. It worked in the end, but there had to be a better way. With my knowledge on how Zanpakuto worked, how Zaraki was suppressing himself, how his seals broke. There had to be a better, faster way of getting him up to full strength. I watched, bored, for 45 minutes as Zaraki was slowly cut down by Unohana. I caught him as he fell, and shot my Ryatsu into him once more to heal him. I had to follow him as he continued to drop onto his knees, and I kept silent as he flipped his blade before stabbing it into the ground in front of him so he could stare at it. I could hear his teeth grind against each other. However, he wasn't angry. He was frustrated. It was obvious, by how his body shook lightly, how he didn't make any noise, how he kept a laser focus on his weapon. I let him think as he healed. Zaraki stood on his own once he was back at 100%, so I stood along with him and backed up as I drew Shiro's blade. He glared at me, but didn't move. I let him have a moment. His glare didn't let up, but I saw that he actually started thinking once he saw that I wasn't advancing. He seemed to be contemplating something, and he seemed to not be happy about it. Before long, the ragged captain snarled to himself before he adjusted his stance. I raised an eyebrow before I analyzed the positioning of his feet, and watched his hands move in front of him. F off with that. I immediately growled. He froze, his left hand open in preparation to grab onto the hilt and his eyes wide. Stop with the goddamn compromises. Compromises? It's the entire reason why you've got so much power under lock and key. You're compromising. What I mean? I rested Shiro's blade on my shoulder. You're too strong to get a fight out of most people, so you compromised and made yourself weaker. Your Ryatsu is too intense for most to handle, so you compromised and got a limiter. Most Shinigami can't survive your first strike, so you compromised and let them come at you. Stop compromising. If they can't keep up with you, stop trying to fight them. But the old man said dash. I don't give a DMN what Yama said. What do you think of two-handed sword fighting? He rolled his eyes. Waste of a goddamn hand, but dash. But nothing. You don't like it, don't Fenji do it. Stop adjusting for other people. Stop stooping to other people's levels. If they can't handle what you've got, don't fight them. Find someone stronger. If they can't keep up, move on. Zaraki growled. What if no one can keep up, huh? He roared. I could hear the fear in the corners of his tone. What if no one can handle me? What if I dash? Abandon your fear. That halted him in his tracks. Move forward and never stop. You'll age if you pull back. You'll die if you hesitate. I slipped Shiro's blade off my shoulder as I began stomping towards the stunned captain. I could feel it. He was at the edge. He just needed the final push. I drew Asen's blade and met Saraki's eyes. You want to fight? F everyone else. F everything else. Fight. His eyes widened. And that's when I felt it. The buzz on my skin. The soft rumbling of the ground as Ryatsu filled the air. The bloodlust filling the air, creating the sense of a blade at my throat. His eyes burned yellow, and his grin ripped across his face once again. I lunged, my own grin spreading across my face as his Ryatsu exploded. And then, finally, I clashed blades with Kenpachi.